idea of the village raising the child, and therefore, what might be some of the ways that as a community, as a church community, as a contributor to the wider community, that is the church contributes to the wider community in which it ministers. How are your operations providing some kind of support for some of the children in your community that might not have the device or might not have the supervision at home, or some so I know, for example, that some churches have allowed the children whose mother have to go to work to come to the church hall and to have some semblance of supervision there, right? So I'm saying that we have to think of some of those ways so that we recognize that given the harsh economic realities, given the changing conditions that contribute to the unstable realities that families face, that families need more than just themselves in order to survive. And I'm saying we as church communities must contribute to providing some of that support. You know, every church should at least sponsor even one child if they can, a device. You know what I mean? So that might be one thing. But as I'm saying, providing a space at the church where they might be able to come and find a safe place to log on or whatever. Or they might not have Wi-Fi at home. Not have Wi-Fi at home, but you can provide the church's Wi-Fi so that they can log on in the church hall and they can be able to still participate in school. So those might be some of the ways in which we recognize that one of the I think unfortunate realities of modern society has been the disintegration of the extended family. And so a lot of the support that uncles and aunts and grandmothers used to provide is not so easily available because you know, the family is at different places and not all in one location, not all in the one community sometimes, right? And therefore, as I'm saying, the wider society, the wider community, who is conscious about the importance of providing those stable features of life for the children, must step in and provide and help to provide some of that stability.
Okay, can I ask, I see that we have 27 people participating in this inaugural expanded work. And we could ask them to speak in their chat room. Is that the best way, or should we do it that way?
Or if somebody wants to raise a question and they can just indicate, raise a hand, or
yes,
and then they can open the mics and they ask a question.
Okay.
So we can, I think we can take both the chat and if somebody wants to raise a question, just indicate by clicking on the raise hand feature, and we identify you and you can open your mic and speak. All right, so there's a raise hand for Paulette Hilton. Paulette, you want to just open your mic and ask your question?
Good evening, everyone. This is not really a question. I'm a little late because I'm coming from an appraisal session with JTC. But I got in and heard you share some ways that as church we can assist. And I just thought I would share this because in addition to those you mentioned, I am presently working with another church where, not another congregation, where the pastor offers the service of not only the Wi-Fi, but open to a small number of children the building. And the problem he faces is that there is need for food, there is need for furniture. So I'm thinking that in addition, we could perhaps join partnership with other churches or other leaders, and thereby assisting. So I just thought I'd share that.
Thank you so much.
We have the raised hand of Pastor Junior McCalla.
Good evening, everyone.
Evening.
Reverend Dr. Hazel, you raised a number of action points from the notes that I've taken, and I'm sure I missed some parts.
Yes.
One of the first questions I wrote was to ask, what are some of the things that are being done to help us emancipate ourselves from mental and cultural slavery in our scenario, say in Jamaica and the Cayman Islands? Can you comment on
that? Maybe not enough, eh?
Okay.
I think in a real sense, there are things about our cultural expression, our dance, our music, our poetry, our drama, that are powerful reflections of who we are as a people. You know what I mean? Okay. One of the most rewarding experiences is to go overseas with a group of Jamaicans, into some kind of international gathering. Almost any group of Jamaicans you go out with, you're going to put somebody inside who can act.
Amen.
Who can recite. So there's something about our innate cultural potential and artistic abilities that I think is being celebrated in our music, celebrated in our cultural expressions, and I think that's a good thing. And it helps to give us a sense of value and identity and worth that many of us benefit from. And when for example, we see what happens with our athletes, there's something about our flag that almost anywhere in the world, mm-hmm. You take up a Jamaican flag, somebody can identify what it is, So I'm saying that there are some things that are happening that are going well, that reinforce a sense of pride and national identity, which is good, I think though that there's a lot more that can be done, certainly in our schools and our churches, in community groups, to help to reinforce the self-love, the sense of love for self. That seems to be one of the things that is often challenged. And sometimes just talking about it, providing a space in which they can talk about it, can be a very valuable place. I can think, for example, that if some of those persons who are serious bleachers, had an opportunity to talk more about how them look, and appreciate the beauty of who we are, then it might lessen some of the strong pressure to change the color of their skin and that sort of a thing, to the point where they injure their skin. They bleach so much that they injure their skin. Right? So I'm thinking that creating conversation and dialogue is one of the things that can happen in our youth fellowships, can happen in our classrooms, in our schools, can happen in our community groups, and things like our sports clubs. We have a group of netballers or basketballers or footballers. Talk to them. Very often, some of those sports clubs revolve around church, and providing a space where they can talk about some of those things might be another place where they can find ways of emancipating themselves from some of the things that have held them captive and into a state of self-hate, which often is the case. I don't know if that helps.
Yeah, very much so. And if I may be permitted to make a follow-up comment, yes, may I comment? Chair?
Yes.
Okay. Reverend Dr. Aza, thanks very much for a point here that came up in terms of I am presently chair of the St. Paul's Infant School Board. And recently I was thinking what kind of legacy I would like to leave. And you just gave one item. So I must say thanks very much. And that is the parenting program for the parents. I'd just like to comment because I really have a burden for family development. So thanks for that point.
Absolutely. I really want to lift up to the idea that I mentioned about street side parenting.
Yes.
Because there are going to be some kind of parenting seminars that we have in the church halls that some people not coming to. Right? So,
exactly.
So we have to take it out on the street. We have to take it out on the road and provide and package it in dramatic forms, you know, that it grabs the attention and provides immediate spin-offs for conversation. And it is, I think, as persons look at alternative ways of parenting their children, that some of the what has become, you know, common practices now in parenting, that some of those things can be challenged and ultimately be changed.
Most definitely. Thanks.
We have a question in the chat, which is from a person who has not been identified by name, but it's a very important question. And I'd like to pose it, Madam Chair and our special guest. I read it. Are there ways in which the Christian faith that was passed on to the enslaved negatively impacted their family and still impact our family life today?
It is quite possible that certainly in relation to our sense of ourself, there are things about the ways in which the scriptures were used, you know, and texts, particular texts, for example, that might have been used to encourage slaves to be passive and to just sit and take it. You know what I mean? You know, slaves obey your masters and that sort of a thing. That sense of so there is some of that I believe has left us to be very passive in our response to authority sometimes, and that might have you know, so and that would have been an abuse of the scriptures, of use of the scriptures, and there is another one of the other things that has I think become something we have to be careful of, is the fact that Christianity has come to the Caribbean in European garbs. It has come to the Caribbean in European form, because the colonizers were the main ones who brought the message of Christ to us. And so images of Jesus, for example, that are often portrayed as this blonde-haired, blue-eyed guy, sometimes leaves us wondering, so where am I as a Black person in God's scheme of things, right? So some of that iconry and imagery that are I would think not so much features of the Christian faith as they are features of European Christianity. I think has contributed to some of the legacy of slavery that has left us feeling that white is better than Black, for example. You know, the notion of, I mentioned earlier, the notion of racial supremacy, white supremacy, that white people better. And of course, as you know, one of the things that eventually became a justification for slavery in the early stages of the slave trade and enslavement was the idea that Africans and Black people were less than humans, you know. And the unfortunate reality is that some of that found justification by in the early Christian church, in the Christian church that were part of the colonial project, you know. People often make reference to the fact that when you go to West Africa, where the slave castles were, where thousands of slaves were sent out on ships, and they would be housed in those castles, sometimes for weeks, months before they were shipped out in inhumane conditions. And that on the same premises, you would have church upstairs. And so that kind of apparent contradiction and hypocrisy, really, in some ways, was a part of the European church, that we have to repair our understanding of scripture, that helps us to appreciate that each one of us, in whatever color or in whatever racial background we are wonderfully and fearfully made in the image of God. We are no less beautiful and special than white and Indian and yellow and Chinese or whatever other race and color exists, right? So there is some repair work that needs to be done with that, because I think it is true that European Christianity carried with it or communicated to us some of the notions of white supremacy that have then left us as Black people feeling less than ourselves. And I think it is likely to have colored how we look at family life.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, Larry.
Okay, two things that I want to say, and then I want to remind us that we have some a limited time, and we want to encourage participation. Two things. One is, I have not heard you speak about the African Christianity, which was also a source, whether it is from the Ethiopian church or whatever, another source of Christian influence and formation, which we need to know more about. That's one. Two, I think I would like us to understand a little bit more about what we are calling, what are these families which consist of people who are, what is the current word again? Blended families. Mm-hmm. I think we have a lot more blended families than we acknowledge, and we're not preparing people for this role at all as step parents and all this kind of thing. Because I think it's 25% of the population gets married at all. And I don't know what the proportion of that is about these blended families. I'd like to hear your comment on those two things.
I can't say I am knowledgeable enough to speak to the African Christianity. Suffice to say that there is sufficient evidence to suggest that long before the colonial project, long before the missionaries from Europe went to Africa, that the gospel was in Africa, that the message of Christ was in Africa, and not just the stories related to the Ethiopian eunuch that went back to Ethiopia. So it's not just the Ethiopian eunuch, and some believe that the whole Ethiopian Orthodox Church and so on eventually sort of was an indication or a mark of how the gospel came to Europe, came to Ethiopia and the rest of Africa. But I understand that in other parts of Africa, there were others who obviously demonstrated an understanding of the message of Christ, and so it wasn't just the missionaries who came to Africa who brought that message, you know. But I don't know enough about it to be able to speak. But it is, I think, a worthwhile area of research and exploration that helps us to understand a little bit more that it is not just is not just the Europeans that knew about Christ, you know. But the other thing about the blended families, the whole issue of breaking of relationships and start of new relationships, and the fact that so many of our children are born to unions that break at some stage, or that are not permanent unions. You know, they are either not married unions, or they are common law unions that they're let me say this, that they're long-term common law unions that are as stable as marriage relationships. But there are a lot of common law unions and other unions that don't have the same kind of stability. And so as long as that condition exists, the likelihood, and when you add to that the increased separation and divorce that happens also, the likelihood of persons who form a union with children from previous unions is likely to increase. But it's almost like you assume that they will get on okay. And I think it's the same kind of approach that we take to marriages sometimes.
I don't know if there's been a problem with our guest's internet, but there are two raised hands from Pastor Erica Dennis and Mr. Rissy Thomas. And perhaps, Madam Host, if you are still on, you might hear what these discussants want to join us with.
Oh, okay. Reverend Hazel has reappeared.
Yes.
Yes. And so the questions can be raised.
Good evening, Reverend Dr. Hazel.
Good evening, Pastor Dennis.
Okay. You mentioned in your presentation about we need to return to where the village takes some responsibility in raising the child or the children.
Yes.
But I don't, from where I stand, I don't think that could be well, I shouldn't say could be, but I don't think that is a present reality based on, you know, my observation, and also based on working in a community where I see 14-year-olds having children and their mother is 30 years old. And both mother and daughter would leave the baby, lock up in a room, and gone to dance. So how is it possible that we're going to find a village like when I was born, and the father and mother in those villages were 50-year-old and 60-year-old were my grandparents or friends of my grandparents, and they could talk to us, they could correct us, and we dare not say a word. These young people, these children, nobody can say anything to them. They will look at a senior person and curse you out. You're not my mother, you're not my father, so why are you talking to me? So I address that. How could that be possible? How can we change that narrative?
And what you're describing there is the reality, and the challenge to return to a sense of village responsibility is an uphill task, right? So I don't for any moment think that it is a magic one. And I think a lot of it is going to come out of how we build relationship with our communities, and how we start from very early to encourage the patterns of parenting that we talk about. So if we are able to get our parents early from when them bringing them children, basic school children to our basic schools, and we're able to talk about how we work together as parents and we do things from there, then as they grow older as parents, and as they have other children, then some of the notions of working together, I think, will become more a part of how they operate. But also, how the church relates to the wider community is important. If people feel like the church is over there so, and they don't really business with us, then it's going to be hard for them to feel like so the church is worthy of their trust, and that when the church talk about providing village support, that they can be trusted. So building trust is a long process, and that is the kind of commitment that we have to have as church people, to build trust with the people in our communities, by relating to them, talking with them, and supporting them in not just church ways, religious ways, you know what I mean? But in other ways, being there for them can really build a relationship that then allows, that frees them up to see church and what happens at church as part of the village and caring of their children. And they are less offended and less hurt when auntie so-and-so or the Sunday school teacher correct the child, But you're absolutely right. It's a serious challenge right now. You correct a child and them go for their mother, and is a bamba. Yeah. Because they feel that you shouldn't talk to my child, So there's a tremendous breakdown with the notion of the village care, right? And I'm saying that part of the repair that we need to do is to see how we can build it back up, but it's not going to be easy.
Thank you.
Hello, yes, thank you there, Rev. And my name is Reese Thomas, and I just want to commend you here as I hear you talk about the importance of having a positive male role model. And I hear you mention what we should be talking more about, what are some of the benefits of having a positive male role model. And I think those benefits should be highlighted. I guess we can assume what they are, but they're probably not really so obvious. What are these benefits? But that's just a comment. I think we know that food, everybody loves food, and food brings people together. So my main question is, have we yet identified?
No, again, Hillary.
My turn? Okay. Have we yet identified funding and created grant proposal to secure monies to be distributed for some of these programs that we talk about? Because it's good to create some after school program to keep kids out of trouble, something to keep them engaged. But we know all these things take money. Well, most of the church are funded based on tithes and offering, but these are extra expenses, right? And this is one of the biggest area of conflict, right? Funding. And so I'm just wondering, as we talk about reparation, and have we yet thought about grant proposal or thought about where some of these money will be coming from and how it will be distributed? Yeah, I'll leave it there. There are more comments, but I'll leave it for us to ponder on that.
Thank you, Racy, because you're raising something that is making a tremendous connection here now. So when, for example, we are saying Europe only need to play Black people for all the mashup we want to do to Black people society. We want to mash up, go and left it in a scrambles, right? So there are some people are saying then what is one of those want Britain to pick up a pile of money and give, if you know if you go dash it away. And so some of those things become some of the ways in which we we undermine our cause for justice by feeling that this idea of seeking reparation is simply seeking people money. But it is in areas like you have described here, where there might be areas of outreach ministry that we feel are helping to do the repair that is necessary to make our society as Black people better. And that those activities require funding. And we are able to say to an agency in the UK, my church is doing this to repair the damage that living in squalor and that, you know, the after effects of the legacy of slavery have caused to my community. And I am doing this to help prepare and build fathering, or whatever the case may be, you know. And this is the funding that I will need. So we begin to make sense of how reparation can happen, right? Because it is not just a question of them just bring up a pile of money and then brief the Jamaican government, and then we are wondering who they are thief of money now and so on. But we can think creatively of ways in which we are doing things in our respective communities that are intended to repair the damage. And we are seeking funding. And you're quite right to say, you're quite right, that maybe one of the skills that we need to develop is helping people, writing proposals and identifying sources of funding outside of the little tuppence that we have in our church coffers. There are funds out there, agencies, NGOs that have funds that are looking for opportunities where they can find credible people, trustworthy people doing projects that are making a difference that they are willing to fund. And I think that we can tap into some of those resources and make a difference in our communities. So thanks very much for those comments, Reese.
I thank you for that response, Dr. Hayes, and for the question asked by Reese. It seems I can't restrain myself but to come in at this point to just say amen to everything that you have said. And in partial response to a question that was asked before about whether the purveyors of the Christian faith of past have come to any kind of realization that some of their work was done in harmful ways in our societies. I think it's a perfect opportunity for me to say and to use it as an opportunity to invite those who have been engaged with us in this very interesting conversation to stay with us for this series, to come to grips with how much the church is doing. One of the things that one of the large missionary societies, not all those who are listening would know about the group called the Council for World Mission, but we are wanting to discuss this with you, that they have this large missionary society with centuries of history has done no less than a 5-year study of how their approaches in the places like Jamaica, the Caribbean, and other parts of the world were wrapped in some of that racism that you have spoken so clearly about, Dr. Hazel. And they have come to an understanding that their work in those centuries were in some ways complicit with the sin of the enslavement of African people. And not only have they come to that recognition, they have issued an apology and are in associating themselves with the spirit of repentance, setting aside funds for the repair. So I'm just overjoyed to hear this link that you have helped us to make, Dr. Hazel, with the kind of work that we, let's say we are the repairers on the ground. These things that you are talking about are about repairing our society for the future. And it is how to connect the willingness of, for example, this missionary society, which is linked to our European brothers and sisters, Christians in Europe, Christians in Britain, Christians in Holland, real people, white people who understand what the reparations movement is about. So it seems to me that it gives the church a tremendous opportunity that no other organization I know of would have that kind of opportunity to actually have the repairers on the ground, such as you are encouraging us to become, to link with those who understand the need, the just cause of reparations, and are prepared to put their money where their mouth is. So I think it really is to us now to how to develop the kinds of projects and the ways in which actions of reparatory justice coming through Europe and from Europe would then be applied in the most positive and developmental ways on the grounds. I'm absolutely excited by the link you have allowed us to see.
Okay. There's another question in the chat. Let me read it and we can try to respond to it as well. White male enslavers impregnated enslaved women. How has that impacted family life? One of the features of Caribbean society is the issue of colorism. And I think that this reality of the white enslavers impregnating the enslaved women led to different shades of people. You know what I mean? So it led to all kind of different colors. And the unfortunate reality is that practically all around the world, this notion of color gradation, that that the fairer you are, so in Jamaica, for example, and we talk about the browning, the browning of the good up body because she brown. And so the notion of white better than black, and the whiter you get, the more good looking you are, is part of the legacy, I think, that feature of slavery society, of the white and black creating children of different shades and who might have different levels of privilege. So the whiter ones and the fairer ones might have had more privilege than. So it has, in fact, I think, impacted both family life and social life. That sense of sometimes unfairness, that those who are fairer seem to get better treatment than those who are less. And I think that gradation of coloration has contributed to that kind of a notion. So I think it has impacted family life.
Can I remind everyone we have about 11 more minutes before we finish at 7:30. So I would encourage those who wish to have ask a question to do so. And I also would like to ask all 32 participants to, I don't know how we would do it, but if you have any thoughts that you would like to share with the panel, to do so. We are grappling with the technology, so it's been recorded. It's going on our YouTube channel, thanks to Nana Calvert and our team, Al-J and so on. But we really want to ensure that the widest possible cross-section of people, multi-generational and so on, tunes into some of these ideas. But of course, there may be issues that we haven't talked about adequately. There may be reading material which Dr. Hazel would recommend for those who want to learn more, etc. So I'm just saying that we have a few more minutes and we want to encourage people to speak. But if you don't want to speak, then you can, Dr. Cohen, how would people send an email to us?
I'm going to think through the easiest ways, but what I'm hoping, and I see one raised hand, and I want to allow for that raised hand to be heard. But as this is a part, let's say we are at the start of our foray into a movement. And I'm again expressing my absolute joy for these 30-odd persons who have joined us on the Zoom, and we know that others are joining us on YouTube who are a part of this conversation. Let me then take the opportunity to announce and to remind others that October 7, that is Thursday, October 7 at 6 o'clock, this is when the conversation continues. So for example, some of those issues that were raised today that need some fleshing out, we can certainly choose to focus those in our next sitting, which is Thursday, the 7th of October. And we ask people to help us ensure that they are on our mailing list. So I think that we do indeed have to work through the logistics of helping us to become a team of working people in a mission. So it's a movement that we are a part of. And certainly some of those brilliant ideas about what kinds of projects should be engaged in the reparatory justice action, especially as it can be linked to some of the international work being done through, say, the missionary societies. And I don't know how many people in and outside the church know that there is this reparatory justice movement within the church internationally, and we can contribute tremendously to it by our ideas. So please let us find ways of contact. If people, for example, send their email addresses into the chat, we will make sure that if it's only by chance you got this invitation today, it is the last time it will be a chance invitation. Your invitation will come directly to you as we continue this series of discussions and movement. But let me yield to a raised hand. Remember, October 7th, Thursday evening at 6 is our next sitting.
Pastor Junior.
Okay.
You will have the last of these questions for today.
Okay.
And then we probably ask Reverend Hayes to speak briefly and Reverend Cowens to speak even more briefly after that in closing. Thank you.
Okay. This question may be directed especially to both Reverend Doctor, but I know my Professor Hillary may have an input here. But have you any idea across Christendom in Jamaica, how much we have family ministry out of the churches? Hope I'm clear.
I don't know. I don't have. Well, I yield to both of these learned gentlemen.
I'm unable to say in any specific terms, how many churches have active family life ministries. And outside of the ministry agency known as Family Life Ministry, again, I don't know how many other agencies take on this matter of family strengthening and empowerment as its core function. Okay. And I really feel that is one of the things that we want to encourage. That coming out of this conversation today, we really want to encourage more churches to take seriously the business of marriage enrichment type activities and events. Marriage groups to support each other, and parenting support, parenting teaching, parenting instruction. And providing activities that bring the family together, doing things that encourage mother, father, and children to be together in a common space. I think those are some of the things that we have to find ways of encouraging, and as a way of as it were, putting a stamp on the importance and the value of family life. Now, I saw in the chat though. A comment was made, which I just want to highlight by Brother Racy. the importance of expanding the guidance and counseling departments in schools. One of the things that we are engaged in, and Reverend Cohen and I were in a meeting earlier on talking about it, was the desire we have as a church to take more active input, make a more active input in our schools. We call it, we talk about an ethics program, but it is really about living, teaching our young people how to make right choices and how to deal with some of the challenges that they have in life, right? And one of the things that we are setting ourselves to do is to try to introduce into our schools an ethics program in an every year level. There have been some of our schools that have experimented with an ethics program at a sixth form level. So in Cayman Prep and High School, at Camperdown, they have an active program, and a number of our other schools have other kinds of things that contribute to their development of their students' social skills and awareness of ethical decision making, you know. But it is something that we as a church are becoming more serious about. And so along the lines that you're saying there, Racy, and even more, not just about providing counseling and guidance, but actually providing more instruction and space for our children to talk about decision making. We talk about the importance of ethics. And when you think, for example, I can help but make mention of what is going on right now in the press about what happened on No Move Day, right? No need to say no more than that, right? But what that demonstrates is that you can be a leader and your character and your understanding of ethical decision is not right. And you, in one action, you undermine your whole sense of authority and direction, right? And that is what happened on that occasion. And what we want to be able to do is to create leaders who understand what it means to be a consistent leader on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And who understands that I must not only say what is right and do what is right, right? But I must appear to be right. What is the optics is important. If I'm doing something that is right, but I am, things about my lifestyle and so on are projecting at something else, then there's an incongruence in who I am, and so the whole idea of building character and building ethical thinking is something that we are becoming more important, more concerned about, and so we are seeking how through an ethics program we can infuse more of that kind of thinking for our students, so that that can be a part of what they bring to their life as citizens in our society.
Thank you so much, Reverend Dr. Hazel. And those schools that you named are the ones that are the United Church schools, and we work very closely with an ecumenical body, the Roman Catholic schools, the Baptist schools, Anglicans and Methodist schools, and so church schools in Jamaica that have in many ways led education can lead in this area as well. Thank you very much. It's a beautiful point on which to bring this very invigorating conversation to a close. Please let it not be the adjournment. Let it just be the termination of this particular setting, and let us be willing and able, by the grace of God, to return to these matters, because it is a business of repair in which your presence has certainly contributed today. Thank you, Reverend Dr. Hazel and Dr. Hickley, for a beautiful start to this journey. And we want to thank all who have joined us in this way. And we trust that you too have been inspired by the discussions, and you will return for us to be continuing this story together. Thursday, the 7th of October at 6 p.m. as we develop a certain rhythm about this. Let us part in peace, receive the blessings of God. Grace, mercy, and peace from God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. Rest, remain, and abide with you and you all, your loved ones, near and far, in this day and even forevermore. Amen.
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 Thank you, Prof.
Thank you. Ah,
And good night, everyone.
good
Let's-
night.
Good night.
Okay.